This episode of Smirking Under Reviews is brought to you by comic books. Yeah, those things that this show is based on, but are also the things that a lot of you use as a basis to mercilessly bully and belittle others for years for liking, but now because it's popular, you suddenly love and think you're experts on. Meanwhile, never actually reading a comic before or intend on reading in the future. Yeah, comics. Woo! I hope Baby Yoda and Rey show up in the new Loki series. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun Reviews, back to talk about WandaVision. Finally, some of you have been asking me why I haven't talked about it before, but we're finally talking about it here in the series finale. So if you like what we're doing here on the channel, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Let's just get into it, except don't forget on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'll be over on Darren Jake's channel, D's Reviews, talking about this as well, with Mark from Enchantment of Eternity and Darren Jake's and myself. We'll be discussing all this kind of all over again. But let's get into WandaVision episode 9. But we're going to be talking about the whole thing, so if you have not watched all of it, why are you watching this? So, WandaVision, episode 9. We'll talk about the finale, and then we'll discuss the rest of it as a series. So, as a whole, this really did come together and told a really great story about emotional tragedy. But one of the things that bothered me about this was something that people were talking about Wonder Woman 84. And it's a little detail, but it's a big one in my opinion, because in Wonder Woman 84, the villain at the end, played by Pedro Pascal, a lot of people thought, not a lot, some people think that the villain had no consequences. It was one of those movies where everything just kind of gets forgiven. And I kind of feel like that's what happens here in a little bit, in a little way. So we're jumping right to it, right? Wanda did this terrible thing based on her grief. And while we all want to romanticize it and be like, it's for love, what she did was she took her powers, closed off an entire city, enslaved the population, kept them frozen at times until they were needed for her stories, and then finally releases them. And then she walks away scot-free. She does not turn herself in for what she did. She just goes off and says, I have to understand my powers. Well, you would have a lot of time to understand your powers if you turned yourself into, let's say, the Avengers. What's left of them anyway. And have them at least keep you somewhere where you wouldn't be able to do this again. That I have a problem with. But the thing is like, because this, if you want to critically review it, as a comic book fan, yeah, this would probably be how it goes. In the books, when the fantasy goes away, right? When Billy and Tommy are disappeared, it's a whole different scenario. It deals with Mephisto and bits of souls and things like that. But in this, when she loses Vision and she loses Tommy and Billy, it just goes away. But in the comics, what they did was they had to erase her memory of them so that she wouldn't go even crazier. In this, though, they just let it happen, and she just flies off to be living in a cabin where part of her is now reading the Darkhold of all things. And if you don't know what the Darkhold is, well, you didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and since most of you didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you don't even know what the hell we're talking about anymore, unless you all Google it all of a sudden. But the Darkhold is this book that no one should have, let alone Wanda now. in Agents of Shield, the Darkhold was used by scientists to try to, well, it's just your normal. They were trying to get advancements in technology, and what they ended up doing was destroying themselves, creating whole new problems for themselves, and ended up letting an AI almost destroy the world. But in this, it's just she's off doing whatever she wants, away from other people, right? We're supposed to feel better because she's away from other people. But, like, they didn't hammer home enough. In fact, I almost felt like at the end, they were a little bit trying to blame the people a little bit. When Monica Rambeau says, they'll never know what you sacrifice. And it's like, she didn't sacrifice anything. It's a fantasy. Okay, us comic book readers know this. And this isn't how it went down in the comics. Wanda has more recently, in the last, like, say 20 years, has been usually used like a plot device to set off a chain of events that causes things horrible to happen. Like, most notably, the No More Mutants thing in House of M, where her probability powers caused the basic almost genocide of mutants. Back in the 80s, her powers were more like, used more like how they kind of talk about them here in this. None of this in the comics ever got to a pitch where she created a whole, town full of people under her spell. In fact, I was always really kind of astonished that they even did this story, because this is like over 30 years old, this kind of thing, what happened to Vision. Because in the comics, again, I'm going to say that a lot, Vision was disassembled and then brought back as White Vision. And before all that, though, she got these kids that aren't real. We could go on about this for days. So the bit where she says to her, like, you'll never know what you sacrificed. I was like, shut up. Almost like these people should be grateful. I mean, like earlier when she tries to rationalize what she did. I kept you safe. It's like, no, no, no. She still doesn't get it. And I don't know really how much she really fully understands by the end of this. She just kind of snaps out of it. That's not how trauma works. She just goes away and hides in a cabin. That's what they want to represent as dealing with it. Those people have every right to want her put away forever. And if there was a case, I mean, for it, she's made it. But she's just allowed to go away. Now, I mean, if anybody tried to come after her, she really would prove to be a true villain. She was a villain in this. She was a good person who lost everything and then used her powers in a bad way. A lot of supervillains start out this way. They believe they're right? A lot of thing about villains is perspective. Nobody thinks they're the villain in their own story, right? So there's not much differentiating, except what she didn't do she didn't do it on purpose. Like she talks to Agatha, like, what you did was on purpose. Agatha came there looking for power to do bad things. I came here to help myself. She can't say that she was going there to help these people. She went there to help herself. She used selfish reasons to get what she wanted. And while we all want to, again, romanticize this, it's a horrible, horrible, deplorable thing she did. But in the end, it was all done really well. I'm glad that I was wrong. I said, well, there's no way that this is going to end in like a supervillain fight. Well, we got one, and it was good. It was great. It was great seeing Catherine Hahn, who... Catherine Hahn has been great. I've loved her since Crossing Jordan, if you guys know that show. She did not disappoint. But it was a bit of a tropey thing, though, the witch who just wants to take powers, but who cares? It was all... So much of this is held together by how great the acting was throughout this entire show. Paul Bettany is unbelievable in this. Elizabeth Olsen is unbelievable in this. Catherine Hahn is unbelievable in this. And we have a great cast of supporting characters for the most part. I still don't know why everybody suddenly loves Darcy or Jimmy Woo or Johnny Woo or whatever his name is. They were mediocre in, not the actors, the characters, okay? Don't get me wrong, the actors are fine. I like both of those actors, actually. I just wish that, what's her name? I can't remember her name. The one who says meow meow. Kat Dennings. She deserves to get better parts than shit on like Two Broke Girls, but I digress. You know, this show made these mediocre characters popular, and that's fine. You know, I really, for me, I really appreciated actors like Deborah Jo Rupp and Emma Caulfield, especially Emma Caulfield in this episode, who got to be really emotional, probably the face of what Wanda did to these people. I have a little girl. She's frozen right now. I'll do whatever you want just to be with my little girl. You have people that are telling her that my husband's on a business trip and not to come back here. Again, this to me goes back to the consequences, the lack of consequences. These people she destroyed their lives. She caused trauma that they'll never get over. She had trauma committed to her, and now she's done it to an entire town. And not just them, it will burst outwards to some of the people that were trying to get to these people that didn't know what happened to them. So, for me, that stuff just doesn't, like, I was disappointed in that. There should have been real consequences here. And maybe there will be someday, but I kind of doubt it. The stuff with Hayward's plan really didn't go anywhere. That'll probably be something that comes up later because of what goes on with White Vision, which we should talk about. I really liked seeing dual visions going at each other. I thought that, that was inevitable. White Vision in the comics was a pretty interesting character because once Vision was disassembled in the book and came back as White Vision, there was questions of who he was. Was he the original Human Torch? But what they find out is that he's just who he is, but he's without the soul. Now in the books, he wasn't put together by Ultron. He was made for that situation, but not like it wasn't quite the same. And his mind wasn't created by his mind was Wonder Man's mind. And Wonder Man in the comics was in love with Wanda, which is why the Vision fell in love with Wanda, and they married in the books. So when Vision was disassembled, Vision was killed, just like in the show. In the books, they talked about all they'd have to do is re-imprint Vision's mind with Wonder Man's mind, and he would be the same as always, except Vision rejected that in the books, because he said that even if you gave me back my mind, which is your mind, I would still not be the original. And they kind of do that here, where they have this question about who is this, who am I? And I know that some of this episode deals with like who they are. Wanda saying at the end, like, I don't need you to tell me who I am, even though she really still doesn't quite understand herself. And I really still don't think that they've quite captured Wanda's powers correctly. They still kind of have her being able to do whatever they want her to do whenever they want to do it. They've gotten a bunch better than they had been. But then you have the conversation between Vision and Vision, where he's like, my mission is to destroy Vision. Well, I'm not him. I'm not anything. I'm a creation from her. You, though, have been built by these people, and your memories are still in there. If you've been built by the same, all the same stuff is in there, your programming will have the memories. I can access them for you, which he does, right? And this is how they get around that part of the story, since Wonder Man is not in the MCU, or been introduced, I don't think, at all. So he just takes off once he gets his memories and says, I am Vision. So that will probably come back once he realized that They want to use him as a more better controlled weapon, which I thought was another interesting part of this. We will see what happens that. I actually was hoping that there was some way that they could have combined the two visions so that way he would go back to normal. But again, this show did not need or didn't what this show deserved was a kind of unhappy ending, a kind of more downbeat ending. Because as much as some of the people out there wanted the fucking Young Avengers, sorry kids, the Young Avengers suck, okay? They suck. That's just my opinion. If you like them, great. They suck. And I don't want them to ever show up in the MCU. You want to make a cartoon? Great. Make a fucking cartoon like Young Justice. Don't make so when Tommy and Billy were erased, I was so happy that we don't have to deal with this because I feel like people were treating them like the next fucking baby Yoda. Ooh, the kids. I was hoping that they weren't gonna back out and have these kids running around all of a sudden. Because another thing that a lot of people I think have a hard time with the show is this is not real what's happening. She's created a fantasy that is realistic, that is become real. But once broken down, none of it's really happened. I mean, she's made things so that they become real, but it's a fantasy she created. None of this would be happening if she hadn't created this fantasy. And so it sounds like I hate this show, right? In the way I'm talking about it, but it's not. It's actually a wonderful story about grief and tragedy, but how someone can become a villain that was once a hero. And Wanda's a great character to do this with, seeing as how her whole life has been like a tragedy. With what happened to her when she was a kid, to going to Hydra, to being experimented on, to being used by Ultron, to accidentally blowing up the Wakandan consulate, right, or whatever, and all this other stuff that's happening, and then she loses Vision twice, then comes back, and he's still dead. She's just one big misery ball. And so I'm really glad that they stuck to the downbeat ending. Monica Rambeau gets to become, well, in the comic she starts as Photon but becomes Spectrum. So they showed her get her powers. In the post-credits scene, we know that the Skrull comes down for Nick Fury, so she'll be up working with Nick Fury in space on Sword. That'll probably be dealing with, maybe we'll finally start getting to Secret Invasion with that storyline. But there's tons more to talk about, and we're going to talk about a lot more of it over on D's Reviews. But I did like the new costume that they gave her. I thought that it was, it wasn't over the top. They've done really well, actually, I think, with the costumes for these characters. Putting Agatha back in the town as herself. Again, when she says you're being cruel, she's right. She's right. She should turn her over. But again, she's making a decision. Should she even be allowed to make this decision? Should she trust herself to make this decision? She says nobody's going to bother you. Don't you think those people in that town are going to remember? Like, how's she going to police this? I'm not saying that Agatha doesn't deserve to be punished, but is Wanda really the person to be punishing her? I don't know. Now, to talk about the rest of the series, right? I feel like the great premise that they used in the first, 6 or so episodes worked pretty well. I thought it was really fun, and the way that they parceled out the mystery. For me, if I was in a bubble watching this, was great. As being watching it and dealing with social media sites like Twitter, This show made me want to pull my fucking hair out, because it was like when a Marvel movie's coming out, right? We got all the hype building up to it, and we speculate. All the people speculate everything that's gonna happen, but it's one movie, and once it comes out, we move on to the next thing, because these days that's what everyone does. It's all about the hype to something, then it's out, and then we move on to the next fucking thing. This, on the other hand, has 9 weeks of hype. Well, first there's the hype all the way building up to the show. When is it coming out? Oh my God, COVID's taking away all our Marvel, till the release date and all the speculation that comes with after that. And then we finally get it. And it has been an unending speculation stream of some of the most idiotic shit I've ever heard in my fucking life by people who have never read a comic book in their goddamn lives. But the show was great. But the show was great, and the premise was great, and I like that people like WandaVision. I hate the way that people endlessly speculate on Twitter, and it made me just angry, because I've been living with this story for like over 30 years, and I just thought it was okay. So let's just get back on topic. Pietro being Ralph Boner. Okay, so he's not any of these multiverse characters that everybody thought he was going to be. I thought that was a pretty interesting thing. Bringing up that she's more powerful than Doctor Strange was an interesting thing. I mean, technically, Doctor Strange in the books has played a huge part in trying to keep Wanda sane, trying to help her deal with her grief. I actually was surprised that they didn't throw in a Doctor Strange cameo here. In fact, see, he would have been the perfect one to come for her and say, you need to come with me. We've got to work on some shit. Like, she's coming with me. We're going to kind of bind her, show her being bound, show her being taken away in some sort of magical spell where he goes, look, this is how we got to get you out of here. Some form of, like, at least potential consequences. But they didn't even do that. And so, in the end, because I'm saving some of my thoughts for over on D's reviews, but I do want to say this. The ending was really good. The heartfelt goodbye was really good. It was all really emotional, but again, it's all fantasy, and she needed to start dealing with it in a more healthy way, right? And it started me thinking about fantasy and reality. Because fantasy is great. All these things that we like, right? That we fill our lives with because we need releases from the horribleness of the world. And especially right now, over the past year or so, it's been really tough. And I think a lot of people have dove into their fantasies head first into an empty pool and just have been wallowing in the fantasies. So fantasy is great, but we all got to come back to reality at some point. And I feel like a lot of us are spiraling out with not having our jobs to go back to, our regular lives to go back to. And hopefully one of these days soon we'll be able to get back to that, so that people can spend some time in reality rather than just in the fantasies. And I take that to myself too. And we all have to face, like what Wanda's going to have to face at some point, is that all the trauma we've suffered, don't let that make us become villains. So anyway, if you like this review, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell for all notifications. Otherwise, we'll be on Darren Jake's channel on Tuesday. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next video.